with David Crow earlier today, and he went on the record supporting the documents that Janine Roberts has, and now those documents are being disseminated to all of those thousands of leading scientists, and this will be a piece of the puzzle that has been missing, that is crucial. So now I believe in the next month or two that we will have tens of thousands of individuals demanding congressional investigations, but not having the dog and pony show that you historically had on Capitol Hill, where you have a group of pro-HIV equals AIDS people, scientists who are getting money, coming in saying, we're making progress, we need more money, billions more. Okay, here's a blank check. The American public's up in arms because of the $700 billion bailout that Wall Street was given, with no accountability. Well, we will end up spending, if we do not challenge this, that amount of money on AIDS and have nothing to show for it, except a lot of failed science. I might also mention that look at the #1 cause of death in many people with AIDS. It is liver failure, which is not one of the 30 conditions that is causing AIDS. Instead, it is the side effect of the medications. And examine carefully and honestly the science behind AZT. An outstanding researcher, a woman of outstanding and impeccable credentials and character, was a part of the AZT study group at the university. And when she saw that they were excluding people who had died, that the people were pulling their pills and opening up and seeing which were sweet, and therefore the placebo, the lactose, she said, this is a terrible study. It's not a double-blind study. I have read all of her reports to the FDA, and all of her work was thrown aside. When the fix was in that this should be fast-tracked, it was fast-tracked. All dissidents and all decent ethical researchers, and you know who that is, don't you? Len Gannett. All right, I'm going to quote individuals that I believe that you should know about. And the next time an Orthodox AIDS person has a say and says, well, there's nobody of credibility, there's nobody of quality, there's nobody who's credentialed who believes all this nonsense. Here are some people who couldn't be here today, but I am going to read, and Minette Loudon is going to read for them. This is from Dr. Hiram Canton, PhD, ethicist, head of the School of Applied Ethics.
Excuse me, Gary, can you repeat that? This is static first.
This is from Dr. Hiram Canton, PhD and ethicist, head of the School of Applied Ethics at Griffith University, Brisbane, Australia. Quote, the first casualty of the war on AIDS was the integrity of science. The exact moment of the crime, 1984, a press conference where the then U.S. Health Secretary Margaret Heckler declared that government scientist Robert Gallo had discovered the viral cause of AIDS. Heckler held the discovery as, quote, yet another miracle for American medicine and science, and a victory.
You have to pick up from Gallo. There was a burst. Did you hear that? Do you know what it could be caused by? Okay. Sometimes there's the police or something.
Okay.
At the top. This is from Dr. Gallo.
It was April 1984, press conference where the then Human Secretary Margaret Heckler declared that government scientist Robert Gallo had discovered the viral cause of AIDS. Heckler held the discovery as, quote, yet another miracle for American medicine and science, and a victory over the dreaded disease. If smoke and mirror tricks are miracles, then miracle it was. Neither Gallo nor the Pasteur Institute proved the virus was pathogenic. Indeed, they did not even isolate it, as the Pasteur Institute later admitted. But the spin doctors at the National Institutes of Health had organized leading journals to endorse Secretary Heckler's, quote, miracle with the seal of science. From that moment, all AIDS research and policy were based on a speculation converted to dogma by bureaucratic power. This initial obvious whopper, victory over dreaded disease, into a never-ending sickness saga that extorts money and grinds millions into the muck of bad medicine, be informed. Withdraw your consent from the most malignant fraud ever perpetrated in the name of medicine. Be aware that the primary truth in the war on AIDS is that powerful agencies have declared war on you and your loved ones, regardless of your HIV status. Be aware that AIDS science is 90% mindless repetition and 10% deeply inconsistent findings of no clinical value, unquote. From Professor David Rasnick, biochemist, and he holds 6 patents on the protease inhibitors, the drugs used in AIDS, and was initially a major proponent that HIV equals AIDS and equals death. Quote, in 1990, at the San Francisco AIDS conference, HIV co-discoverer Luc Montagnier announced that HIV did not, after all, kill T cells and could not be the cause of AIDS. Within hours of making this announcement, he was attacked by the very industry he helped to create. The HIV hypothesis of AIDS is the biggest scientific medical blunder of the 20th century. The evidence is overwhelming that HIV is not contagious, not sexually transmitted, or caused by HIV. The physicians who know or suspect the truth are embarrassed or afraid to admit that HIV tests are absurd and should be outlawed, and that the anti-HIV drugs are injuring and killing people. As a scientist who has studied AIDS for 20 years, I have determined that AIDS has little to do with science and is not even primarily a medical issue. AIDS is a sociological phenomenon held together by fear, creating a kind of medical McCarthyism that has transgressed and collapsed all the rules of science and has imposed a brew of belief in pseudoscience on a vulnerable public. And mind you, this was a mainstream scientist within the AIDS community whose very drugs were used by hundreds of thousands of people until he looked for the truth. This is from Dr. Donald W. Miller, medical doctor, Harvard University, Dartmouth, and professor, University of Washington School of Medicine. Quote, AIDS is a government-defined disease. The CDC and the government-funded investigators accept as fact the supposition that AIDS is caused by HIV and is sexually transmitted. This is not to be questioned, but this HIV equals AIDS model does not jibe with the true facts of the matter. Only 1 in 1,000 unprotected sexual contacts transmits HIV, and only 1 in 275 U.S. citizens has antibodies to the virus. Consequently, the average uninfected person would need to have 275,000 random unprotected sexual contacts to acquire sexually transmitted HIV. And finally, just on the politics of this, we have Tony Brown, one of the most courageous and ethical journalists in the United States. He is also the founding dean of the School of Communication at Howard University, and he is coordinator of the historic Walk to Freedom March with Martin Luther King Jr., and of course he's the PBS show Tony Brown's Journal. Quote, the greatest threat to life in the United States and the rest of the world is not the 30 diseases we call AIDS. It is the multi-billion-dollar AIDS industry composed of government, academic, medical, and industrial interests in the United States. I've concluded that AIDS is a scientifically dishonest construct, and as exemplified in the death of my friend Arthur Ashe, the lies that we have been told make it all the more deadly. On Dr. Robert Gallo, these are the views of individuals who have not been invited on public television, where that would be the most appropriate forum to challenge Dr. Gallo. Dr. Gallo deserves every opportunity to defend himself in any court of public opinion or any other jurisdiction. Therefore, allow Gallo and his detractors an opportunity to face each other and let the audience decide who is correct. Here is Dr. Joseph Sonnabend. He is a founder of the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR. Quote, Gallo was certain, but the point is not to focus on Gallo. It's us, all of us in the scientific community. We let him get away with it. Nobody would say a word against Gallo. It had a lot to do with patriotism, the idea that this great discovery was made by an American. By Dr.